Well, good morning. Welcome to Coffee with the Pastor. We are looking about grace in space. How do we get along with people who disagree with us in this culture that we have where people have a hard time disagreeing? It seems like it's worse than it's ever been, but it's always been kind of bad. I've been in ministry over 40 years. And I can just tell you, the group of people that I've had the hardest time with are people who just think, hey, it's my way or the highway. My thoughts are God's thoughts. You know, I like to define prayer as thinking God's thoughts after Him. And a lot of people think, well, God thinks His thoughts after my thoughts. I have pastored a lot of people who just, boy, if you disagree with them, it's like you personally attack them. It's like you've attacked God. And those kind of folks are pretty miserable to try and deal with. I've never figured out how to really deal with those folks. Jesus dealt with those folks. He had a group called the Pharisees that he had to deal with who were that way. They had their set beliefs, and it sounded good for what they believed. I mean, what they did is that they were very devout. They studied the scriptures. They memorized the whole Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible. They memorized it all. Not only did they memorize it, but then they started interpreting it, and this is what it means. And then this is how you apply it. And they had rules for every law. There's over 700 laws, and they had rules for how you should, how you did it. Right. Now I understand that's not Scripture. That's their interpretation of Scripture. But they had made their interpretation of Scripture and how you should interpret those laws and how you should obey those laws equal with the Scripture. Well, Jesus didn't agree with that. One of the practices that they had, it seemed pretty noble, was that they chose to fast twice a week. They fasted on Tuesday and fasted on Thursday. Old Testament did not require that. The only time really the Old Testament required some fasting was on Yom Kippur and maybe some other feast days, but not certainly twice a week. But they had gotten that, but that had become more of that. That was a sign for how that they would show that they were more spiritual, more holy than other people. But I want to read this passage that in Mark chapter 2, beginning with verse 18, about Jesus dealing with the Pharisees about fasting. Now John's disciples and the Pharisees were fasting. Some people came and asked Jesus, how is it that John's disciples and the disciples of the Pharisees are fasting, but not yours? Jesus answered, how can the guest or the bridegroom fast while he is with them? They cannot, so long as they have him with them. But the time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and on that day they will fast. Now, no one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth on an old garment. Otherwise, the new piece will pull away from the old, making the tear worse. No one pours new wine into old wineskins. Otherwise, the wine will burst the skins, and both the wine and the wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins. So the people are coming up and they're saying, well, you know, John's disciples fast. They do the fast, and it was on Tuesdays and Thursdays that the Pharisees fast. John's disciples observed that. They fasted on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Pharisees fasted on Tuesdays and Thursdays. But Jesus and his disciples were eating. Why aren't y'all fasting? Religious people fast. It just is explained, you know, when you go to a wedding feast and you're with the groom, you don't fast. You celebrate. You eat. You laugh. You have a good time. I'm the bridegroom. I'm with my disciples. He said, there come a time when they will fast. Interesting enough, the early church did fast. Some of the early writings we have is that they wouldn't fast on Tuesday and Thursday because they didn't want to be seem like the Pharisees, so they usually did Monday and Wednesday. And so they did different days of the week so as not to seem the same. But I think one of the point here is that we need to follow Jesus. We need to have our faith in him. We need to have love for others. We need to have love for God. But we don't have to follow all these little rules and regulations everybody wants to put on us. It's called legalism. And you know, the other side of the coin is that what we think is more spiritual may not be more spiritual. I had a man in my last church, and if you just look from the outside, you would think this man was very devout. When you got to really looking at his fruit, not so much. But he would come into my office periodically. He came in a lot when I first got there, and then not as much as I was there for a while. But he would come in periodically, and he really disliked how we did worship. He disliked it. He didn't like the music selection. He thought that, and our music minister there did a good job of blending hymns and praise songs and all, but he wanted more Bill Gaither songs, more hymns. He didn't think we ought to be doing any of the new praise stuff and like that. Didn't really like how I preached. Would actually bring me Sunday school lessons of his to show me how I should be preaching. And he just never, I mean, the whole time I was there, and I was there 13 years, the whole time I was there, he would come in every now and then and just tell me how awful our service was. He couldn't worship there. I just can't worship when I come to church. And I have to go watch a Bill Gaither video or something so I can worship, but I just can't worship at church. Okay? Whole time I was there. And that was his encouragement to me. We just didn't have worship. Well, a few years ago, I went back for a funeral, and he came to the funeral, and we were talking. And it's at the funeral home before the service, and during they had a little visitation thing. He started telling me, he said, "Oh, the church is in bad shape." He said, "Man, I haven't had a worship service since you've left, Pastor." And I wanted to come unglued on the guy, but it was at a funeral and a visitation service, so I didn't say anything. I was nice, but I'm thinking, all you did was complain about our worship services when I was here. You complained about my preaching. You complained about everything about it. And now you're telling me that you did worship when I was here, and you can't now. And so I wanted to point that out to him, but I didn't. I was nice. But Jesus dealt with these kind of folks too. He dealt with folks who, no matter what you did, you couldn't satisfy them. No matter what all you did. And the thing about it is, Jesus really never cared as long as they weren't hurting other people. For himself, they were always questioning him and trying to catch him that he wasn't really being religious enough, or that he was breaking one of their laws. And you know, it's hard to live up to somebody else's expectations when they have their own laws and not really the Bible. So I encourage you today, if you have some people like that in your life, unless they're hurting somebody else, they're not going to hurt you. Just don't pay attention to them. And, you know, truthfully, people treated Jesus horribly and all, and we can take little insults from now and then and all. But like I say, now if they're starting to hurt and others, then it may be time to deal with them. We'll talk more about the Pharisees later, but I've enjoyed looking at how Jesus dealt with people who disagreed with him or had differences from him. And I think we can learn a lot from him on how to handle our society. So we'll continue this series next week. Hope to see a lot of you all Sunday at church, and then others of you, I'll see you next Monday. Have a good weekend.